Welcome in, everyone. You are listening once again to the Authority Podcast here on the Podcast Network. Thanks as always for joining us. Really happy to have you here for a conversation today about that critical topic of educator wellness, something we've talked about here from time to time. Great time to revisit it with our guest today, dive into some new angles of how leaders can really create, build, and sustain the vision of wellness. My guests are Bill Barnes and Erin Lehmann. Bill is the superintendent for the Howard County Public School System in Maryland. He was a recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching and has served on the board of directors for the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics. Erin currently serves as an associate professor for the University of South Dakota. She's an author, leader, and facilitator advocating for leading instructional improvement. Their book is called Leading Educator Wellness: 6 Critical Actions to Support All Staff. Bill and Erin, welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon. How you doing, Ross? Good to be here.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing well. Great to have you both here. I think there's a lot to discuss here and really looking forward to your insights. Would love to start here around it's almost skipping to the end a little bit, but I think it's kind of what we're building toward, thinking about the tangible challenges that school leaders, education leaders, and districts are facing right now. Attrition, shortages, effectiveness, of course, like all these various things that wellness certainly can be a component of addressing those. But I'm really interested in your view on what are some of the factors that wellness addresses, like those tangible pieces. How impactful can it really be towards those? And kind of defining that a little bit as we get started. I guess, Bill, we'll start with you on this one, then Erin, I'm sure she'll have a lot to add.
Yeah, so education and being an educator has always been a challenging profession, and probably every generation says it's never been harder than it is right now. But I think that certainly applies here. It's not the core root of the job hasn't changed all that much. We're still here receiving children. Parents are sending us the best they have, and the kids come in ready to learn. But the external pressures have ratcheted up quite a bit, both from a student standpoint, students and their personal devices. There's lots of noise in their world. Certainly, the pandemic rocked everybody's world. And from an educator standpoint, they find themselves sometimes in the crosshairs of political agendas. They see themselves as victims of weaponization of social media. It feels like a really intense situation. So they come to work having experienced all the same things that we're grappling with as a community, as a nation, and then they have to perform in a fishbowl. And so we started seeing some indicators of how wellness was impacting, our staff in terms of attendance rates. Staff attendance started to slip, not just student attendance. We have chronic absenteeism challenge both for the little ones and the big ones. We started looking at increased healthcare, rise in healthcare costs, but disproportionately. So our staff were using more resources, and so our costs were increasing. And just the way our staff were presenting and the feedback we were getting in terms of increased workload, burnout, there's just a lot of inputs on educators. So pre-pandemic, it started to catch our eye, but right now a focus on improving educator wellness, and we define educators as all staff that work in a school district and it's all 9,000 of ours working in service to students, whether they're a custodian, teacher, administrator, superintendent. Now it's an essential focus area. If we don't focus on keeping our staff well, they can't possibly best serve our students, and we're going to lose them to other. They're just going to start leaving. Last one I'll say is we started to see people who were vesting for full retirement at 30 years retiring on that 30-year and 1 day mark, instead of having in our district many teachers were working into 35, 38, 40, 45 years. But people are just leaving, and that's a large portion of our workforce walking out of the door. So, Erin, did you have anything you want to add in there?
Everything that I think mentioned in the book, and that big one of the misalignment of those responsibilities and what educators are actually doing. I think when Bill and I got together and started thinking about what this book is going to look like, these kept coming up over and over again. And then I think maybe our editor, Bill, gave us that book, Triage Your School by that Christopher Jensen. And that was so powerful because that segued into the work that we're doing now, because he was saying like those poorly designed operations, they will create that persistent work-related stress, and that will actually lead to burnout. And we're like, this is what we have to do. We have to look at the
Mhm.
systems approach to this versus just looking at maybe the singular lens of educator wellness. We need to look at the entire system.
Is there anything in your work on the book or the different resources you referenced that, or even just from your direct experience, that you feel like either confirmed or conflicted with the conventional wisdom, what's commonly discussed or understood to be so about wellness, the factors affecting it, all of that, Erin?
I think one of the things is that people think that they have to take care of their own wellness themselves, which they do. They've got to make that decision first and foremost. But if there's not a system that's supportive of that, I'm going to err on the side of let's not focus on that. And when Bill and I first started brainstorming, you should see our brainstorms. Actually, I don't want anybody to see these brainstorms, but we kept going back to our own leadership and the people that have worked for us. And it is that empathetic leader of how can we take care of the people who are taking care of our students? Because if we do this well and right, and we do this over and over again, they're not going to want to leave us because we've created a system where they thrive because we need the people in front of the students help.
Yeah.
And I started seeing, talk about conventional wisdom. I mean, we, like every district that I've worked in or have friends that work in, we had all of the pretty typical episodic events. There might be a spa week or there might be a wellness day, but it wasn't anything that was sustained. And so I knew that we had gone over the breach when we would go into rooms and we would talk about and try, I'd use the phrase self-care or urging people to engage and practice self-care. And the dirty looks or the comments or the sneers or the tears would emerge because people had just become fatigued with that advice. And it just felt like we were telling them to do one more thing on their own. And, and our leaders, from a leadership standpoint, they were looking at us and they're like, yeah, right. When have you built a system or structure that permits us to do that? We're on the clock 24/7. And so we were at risk in our district at losing our people without really trying to step back and understand what was going on.
The other thing, Bill, that you bring up, because you and I did some research and looked into this quite a bit, is there's a lot of resources helping students right now, and there are people checking in with the teachers right now. Like, but then that was the other missing piece is like, who's checking in with these leaders? And we found that there is not actually a lot of research out there in terms of people checking in on the leaders. And so when you do ask these leaders, how are you doing? And they're like, what do you want out of this? What do you
Yeah.
need from me? I didn't think that a lot of the leaders that we talked to initially thought that it was like, no, we really are curious about your own well-being.
Yeah. And you write that the leader, or you start with leader wellness first and write that that's the beginning point. But why did you choose to go in that direction? And within that, is there a particular message that you're wanting to send to school and district leaders by having that as the starting point?
Yeah, I'd say that if we're going to take a systems approach to wellness, you're really going to we're going to need leaders to kind of understand it, spearhead it. Wellness is not native to our sort of educational leadership training, our path. If you were a health or physical education teacher, you probably have some content chops in this space. If you're a counselor or a social worker in our district, you have some chops, but most content leaders or traditional people we're hiring don't have those chops. And so taking a systems approach, investing in our leaders, making sure they have the confidence in the content is really actually where we're beginning in Howard County, building up capacity of those at school level, teacher reps, leader reps. So we wanted to invest in leaders. We were leaders looking for something and we couldn't find something. And we're encouraged by our colleagues to put kind of journal of what we were working on and then try to codify it, what we were setting out to do. And so that's how the book emerged. But, we need our leaders to be present in this work. I need people to want to be leaders. People look at what our leaders do, and teachers are saying, I don't want any part of that. Our pool of aspiring leaders for assistant principals and principals is drained this time of year. And so I hold my breath that we can get to the next big hiring season, so that's part of my motivation. I'm
And
not
the other
Aaron, do you have some other
thing,
things?
Ross, that you bring up a good point, because Bill and I actually had this chapter at the end of the book. And then we thought, okay, we have to rewrite this whole thing and the whole
Mm,
narrative, because it will be really hard to lead the work if you yourself do not believe in the work.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it leads to a question of, can wellness be taught? Can one be taught to believe in the concept of prioritizing wellness for oneself and the things that means? And we'll talk about the dimensions and how wellness is defined. But
Mhm.
I do think for a lot of people of any role, but particularly, let's say it's a leader who has gone so many years into their career and their professional experience and has not understood the norm or expectation to be a particular state of well-being. How is that reprogrammed to start with, right? And because it would be quite difficult, I would think, for there to be any type of vision that is implemented at scale if the central hub of that, the leader, is not able to live it, even if they are interested in it for staff, colleagues, etc., right? That it really requires a belief that it's for everybody, I guess, Bill.
Yeah, and I think that's we really early on. Let's take care of yourself, because I think our colleagues Tim Kano, Tina Bruggeron write elegantly. An unregulated adult can't support an unregulated child, and Erin extrapolates that. But an unregulated leader can't support an unregulated adult or a child. And so we need our leaders to both be confident, understand it's not in any of these dimensions of wellness. I mean, neither of us succeed in all of them all the time, and so you have to grapple. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome. We set out and you say, hey, I've struggled with food in my whole life. Like, so how am I going to go and talk to people about food choices when that's been a difficult, routine for me to maintain? And yet, as a leader, I need to understand how we define it, how we lay it down, or how it's been defined or laid down. And then quickly build up community so that I can both lead the work and get the tactical part done, laid out, but also I need to be part of the community, and I need staff to see me as a leader working on the work too, and not in a hierarchical positional authority space. But hey, this is all of our work, and it is not, I'm not better at it, worse at it. Nobody's winning here in every space, probably. So we're going to need each other. We need to create community. And so if it's going to work, we kind of execute on that. Let me be clear about it. This isn't one more thing for leaders to do. We can lay it down on typical structures like in school improvement plans, district plans, but it doesn't present that way. We have to quickly break down those structures and be part of community as leaders. So I'm as curious as you are, Ross, how it goes to scale, because we've seen it in really small spaces,
Mhm.
and we've seen it work for a minute and then stop working because it was person dependent or a staff member dependent in a school. Usually every school has one or two people really jazzed up about this, but can it be the leader, and what's the leader's role? That's really clearly defined. That's going to be important.
Well, and there's some research saying if you've got this almost 60% of educators identify with this exhaustion and career burnout, if you're in this leader position, and I remember when I would have like 30, 40, 50 applicants for one position, and then now it's like four. And I went, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, this is, I mean, they're seeing this as a reality. And so that is an excellent point. Like sometimes people aren't going to change or believe in the work, but they're seeing who they're getting. So they know that ripple effect is true, it's accurate. Teachers are wanting to burn out. Teachers are wanting to retire earlier. I mean, it's scary. So if we don't have educators, then who do we have?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, of course, all of the, as the leader, quote unquote, right? All of the people that the leader is responsible for within the organization and the various ways in which the culture, the practice of wellness, culture of well-being directly affects staff, faculty, students, etc. But also, I mean, not to heap another thing on the leader's shoulders, but
Yeah.
there is an element of the sustainability of the profession, right? And the ways in
Mhm.
which, when there's not some consistent buy into these practices, the reinvigoration, the healthy, culture within schools and within the education profession, that there's going to be a self-perpetuating cycle where it's not going to be inviting to those new educators coming in. And as you're getting into, okay, that's one of the direct effects of we can't afford this attrition, is because there's not another person to come in and take the
Right?
job. And when it is, it's someone who doesn't necessarily have the experience or the proven effectiveness. But the profession can be a poor representation of itself, I guess, right? To that young student who's thinking about, what should I major in? What should I go into? Even the person who starts their career in education and quickly exits out, that they're often probably coming into it with already the assumption of it being all of those difficult things, overwhelming, the burnout, the any of the positives being almost spoken of in a language that it's like a service opportunity versus a professional role. And then it's like, yeah. And so, and I'm sure you've each been in education long enough to have seen those trends. Like you mentioned, it used to be 40 to 50 people trying to get a job. Now it's maybe a few if we're lucky. I guess all of that to say, what is the obligation and the opportunity of folks in leadership roles within education to surface this topic to their peers, right? And look at it across the system to say, like, we all really need to get with this, because this is what we're looking at down the road. We all have these things that we're dealing with in our organizations today, and we're trying to make a difference in that. But it's only going to make it worse for each of us, right? As there's whatever, the county is, Baltimore County is up the road, right? And if they have a shortage and you have a shortage and then you have an opening, you're both competing, right? And it's like
Yeah.
everybody is struggling, because we really all need to be getting better together, or else we're really not going to be able to fulfill our mission here of educating kids over the long term.
You bring up
I
a good
think, yeah,
point. I'm going to just pop in real quick because you said, and this is something that Bill and I had, and I think we kept it at the top of one of our pages just because we're like, we cannot forget this. When we created and developed this framework, we said we do not want to add more to the plates of these school leaders, of these district leaders, because that's what happens all the time. People keep adding, but you'll never take anything off. And so we thought, what is it something that they already do? And most of them do sometimes well and right, sometimes not so much. What framework can we adapt or adopt to kind of encompass what we envision? And so you brought up like obligation and an opportunity. The obligation most districts and schools have to do is some sort of like school improvement planning process, whether it be attendance, it might be culture, it might be mathematics, it might be literacy, whatever it is in terms of district and or school leadership. And we thought, let's do that because schools and districts are used to this format, used to looking at, okay, let's conduct this needs assessment and see really what the priorities are. So how can we maybe incorporate it so we're not doubling the workload for educators, but really, I would say integrating wellness into that improvement plan. So it's just part of the culture.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think so structurally finding a home, but I think that was because you hit the part that I wanted to hit, Aaron. It's really important for us to give leaders space and grace, and teachers space and grace, and all of our employees. So we got to acknowledge what's happened and where we sit, and that nothing's wrong with them for feeling these ways, and that things have intensified. This is a different job, and certainly those that have been around for 30 years, like I have, it's there. It looks the same. I can identify, I recognize it, it's familiar, but the pressures are very different. And so recognition, acknowledgement of this has gone a long way. Prioritizing it, putting it in our strategic plan in Howard County as the top priority. It has been important. People have appreciated it, but they'll only appreciate it if you start putting some actions behind it. And we do have to, one of our themes this year is really focus and concentration. So that means that if we're going to get better at a thing, we may just be staying mediocre or bad at other things because we can't do it all. And giving permission to kind of engage in conversations and help us understand what we have to do legally and what we might stop doing, and then be really disciplined about some of those protocols or habits that have formed, because email's 24/7, but it shouldn't be. And when somebody sees an email come from me, if it's 3 in the morning, I'm sending an unintentional message that, oh, the superintendent wants us to meet. We should be working around the clock. That's not it. That's just when I happen to be up and send the email. So maybe I've got to schedule my send or just write it down or save the draft. And what kind of practices, small and large, can we engage in that really start to value and honor people's time? Because otherwise, you end up, and I saw this 30 years ago as a new teacher, and I'm like, I don't want to be one of those. You end up with martyrs and people that are in service of children but are really raging about the profession, and then we are not good carriers of our own story, and when I would hear teachers back then say to our students, you can do anything you want, just I wouldn't go into education, or I'd never let my child be an educator. That speaks to sort of the outcome of a lot of pressures. And so how do we name it, own it, work through it so that those stories change, and then people can start encouraging their own children to want to be in education and turn the corner a little bit. So yeah.
And value when teachers, educators are making the right choices. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a school and it was a very novice new teacher. We would work on these learning goals that she needed to help improve her, I would just say her craft. And she's like, well, Erin, I love your list, but I'm not doing it all because I show up at 7:30 based on my contract. I leave at 4 and I don't take a bag home with me and I never will. And I went, oh my gosh, listen to these boundaries. I didn't even have words. I was in awe, but it helped me be a better coach because I went, okay, she has set the boundaries for her health, her well-being. How can we as leaders really work around that? And we did. Here's your one goal, one small, like instructional goal. What are your thoughts? Oh, I can totally do this. I can completely integrate it. So I love those stories too, of validating and naming and celebrating. I think we have a whole section in there about celebrate what you see when it is done well and right. Because at first I was shocked. Wait,
Yeah.
no, you got to bring a bag home. Every educator brings a bag home. I didn't ever, I still bring a bag home. Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that leads to like with communicating the vision and doing so authentically, demonstrating authentic commitment to what that is, right? In the case of the educator you just mentioned, it's like, how do we make sure what's on paper and what's in practice are the same? Because I'm sure on paper it says your work hours are 7:30 to 4 o'clock. And but then there's the unwritten expectation of like, well, it's just part of it, right? You have to do this. And within reason, every now and then there's exceptions on a certain day or whatever. But the fact that it really shouldn't be that noteworthy when somebody's saying, oh, I'm doing things according to what the job is and what the role is. And that shouldn't have to feel like I need to be that firm in setting that boundary for myself when that is what my job is. But that's just one example. But when you're the leader, right? And also like coupling it with the authenticity of like what wellness means and doesn't mean, because it means, I would say, tell me if this is off, but supporting the various factors of well-being that enable those educators to maintain and sustain a high standard of performance, right? High standards in their work. It doesn't mean it's just a free for all. Okay, you can just disappear at lunchtime, not come back or
Yeah.
whatever, right? And I'm sure there's cases where a first attempt kind of goes a little bit more in that direction, that it just means being looser and not really having a lot of parameters, taking it easy. It might almost feel like, I'm sure there's cases where it almost feels like the leverage is in that direction in places that are really struggling with recruitment, hiring, retention, etc. But how do you really think about those factors of like, what does authentic mean in here? What is my community, my staff, faculty, like what are the things that matter to them? And how do I authentically demonstrate our commitment to that we're seeing that through, but that is in support of, not in lieu of, the high standard that we hold for ourselves here in our community.
Yeah, so I think that I love the word authentic there, because this is not the kind of endeavor that's going to be, we've always need to customize our professional learning and differentiate it. We don't always do it, because if you're doing things at scale and you're warehousing and you're trying to you have limited resources at the district level or the school level, you just fall into some bad habits. We don't differentiate. We don't always practice what we preach at the professional learning level. And yet, if we don't differentiate here, we're just going to turn people off because it's not every, as you said, not everybody's needs and wellness are the same thing. And defining that or anchoring in those dimensions of physical, social, emotional, and so forth. Like I think anchoring in that creates the spaces that people can dig in. If we anchor in those routines that Booger and Kano define, I think people can find a space to latch into and find some people that are also wanting to grow in those spaces. So I think this journey is going to inevitably lead to that. It's going to teach us something about true differentiation of adult learning. And, or if we don't, I think I won't even start it in my district if we're not committed to that because it won't succeed. We're not going to, hey, this month is, we're going to be focused. This quarter is physical wellness quarter, and everybody's going to ram down and we're going to talk about sleep and food and movement. And this isn't that kind of thing. This is a very personal journey. We're going to have to really focus on for authenticity, setting strong norms, taking time to explain the why, really helping people understand that we're in this together, that we don't know everything yet, that we're going to learn together, our community will expand its knowledge base. That's at least how we're setting out to do it. We're to go slow to go fast is a phrase we use a lot, but sometimes you just go slow to go slow. We don't want to rush it and mess this up because people are willing to ride along. They're willing for us to change some things. You described the wellness. We had wellness days where we gave half days to teacher, just go do what you got to do. School staff, just go. We don't even need to know, just do it. And it didn't really improve what people were saying about their job. It wasn't at the measurement level and effective. So I bought back half of that last week. We had one, and we filled it instead with professional learning for part of it, saying, look, wellness is also getting better at your job, and we can improve how you feel about your work by leveling you up or helping you level up. And so people are willing to walk alongside this journey but they're skeptical, right? Because there's a lot of I'm having to be vulnerable as an educator in letting you know how I might not be well. And yet I say that and they're telling us that in very direct and aggressive ways, some people on the other side of it. So you've already told us we're not well. We're saying we're not well. Are you willing to join a community and give it a run? So authenticity is going to be critical as we do this work.
Differentiation piece is important, right? I mean, for some people, the thing that allows them to recharge is that little bit of time off, and that's how they do it. Other people, that's
Yep.
just more time for them to think about how much they hate their job. For one educator, the thing that really helps them feel like centered and having control is those boundaries around hours and what I do. For somebody else, that's not the thing at all. They're like, I prefer to take it home because I can do
Yeah.
an hour of work later at night and then I'm getting a head start on the next day. And if that's the only thing that we're focused on, and like the school just says it's this one size fits all, this is what everybody should do, then it's going to make it even worse for that person who's saying that is the opposite of what I need.
Right
And
on.
in our professional learning chapter, actually, we brought in some Hanover research because we wanted people to see like differentiation does matter. Like you approach the execution almost like as a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. What do these educators need? Because that was the other thing. Like you may think one thing, but that's why we're so, I would say, purposeful in you. If you don't have this vision, if you don't conduct a needs assessment, you don't really know what's going on, then you're shooting from the hip. Like I think
Mhm.
everybody needs back massages, which maybe they do, but maybe they don't, whatever it is. But if you don't know, and that's the other thing too, is like what can we make and create for these leaders so they don't have to do it themselves? Because the other thing that we wanted and to come out is when the vision is being created, it should not be done alone or in isolation or a silo. And so creating this really strong team that everybody has a role, everybody has a strength that they bring to this team, because Bill and I, we are strong educators and we are strong leaders, but my goodness, I might not be the best person that should counsel somebody. So we've got to bring in the strengths of all of the people around us. And so I think that was a piece that we really tried to bring into the book, but whew, it's kind of tricky.
Yeah. Let's talk about that needs assessment. I mean, within it, how do you measure what the current state of things is, and then how do you go about evaluating and assessing what your needs are, where the needs are, how you might address them, Erin?
Well, I would say don't use your thoughts and opinions as a leader because you will have a lot of people really upset with you. But this is the time to engage all the staff members. This is when you're taking that qualitative and the quantitative data. Bill and I, we have some surveys that we've created out. We want the interviews. We want the focus groups because we said spend time on this needs assessment because maybe the district has a different vision sometimes even than a building, because we know that buildings sometimes do have different personalities. And so while yes, you might look at this from the district lens, then also pare it down so it actually is meaningful to the people that are right next to you. And so we tried to incorporate a ton of examples of the qualitative, quantitative ways that you can gather this data, analyze this data, so you can actually create next steps, goals, action plans.
Yeah, there's not really for some defensible or tried and true sort of, there are different surveys and different things, but nothing that quite was personalized enough. And so we wanted leaders to have a starting point. So there are some really some tools that they can use or they can riff off of or they can customize with their team. We don't want to take away all the adult learning that can happen as their team starts to grow and wander together. Because at the root of this, the question is like, how well is your school or district? Like how would we even go about defining that? And there is real power in letting the adults that are experiencing and having all the feels and the emotions that go with the work really unpack that. And what do they think would be the benefit, and how do their thoughts and experiences then reconcile with research and other resources? So I think we've done a nice job of giving people some tools they can get off the ground with. But it was one of the challenges was how do you give leaders enough that it's not so pick it up and put it down that we skip over all the engagement parts. Engagement's essential, and especially at the front end of this is really just kind of understanding and giving the educators you serve an opportunity to define the metrics that they think, hey, what if we answer, how would we answer this question with great joy and say that we are a well school in 3 years, 5 years, and let's define those metrics together. So yeah, Erin, I think you hit on that. We got some starter stuff, but then lean on your staff a little bit to give them the space.
I mean, you referenced the metrics and you write in the book about SMART wellness goals, and folks have probably heard about SMART goals, but you can certainly fill in the details there. But I mean, it's so interesting that you're applying the framework to the wellness. I mean, and important, I mean, to have the specific measurable, achieve the parameters for defining like what are the elements that we're focusing on and how can we define whether we are actually moving them in the domains, because a skeptic or a just somebody who's been around and has seen initiatives maybe fall short might say, well, it all sounds good, but it is too intangible and too indefinable and ultimately subjective, right? And I think what you're trying to get at is saying, after you have gone through that needs assessment, after you've defined what's really happening in our school community, what are the areas that we need to work on, that you can then align some specific goals around those and the things that you want to move.
Yeah, and I think that's self-monitoring. I mean, it's going to happen at the individual level and at the school level, and critics would be right in that way. And then we'd offer too that we mentioned that we let off with some of the metrics we've been tracking that are indicators of an absence of full wellness in our districts, whether it's people coming to work, how they come to work, student discipline data, adult discipline data, and healthcare costs. Like those are still some hard metrics we can track and we should track as we go down, and schools should pay attention to those things too and really unpack to understand it. And yet, like leaving that space, some of that gray space, that's the soft research space, because hey, we just want to get better. How are we going to keep score? Let's agree on how we're going to keep score and see if we're meeting our own expectations. Like that's going to be an important part of this too.
It's going to help you understand the why and the how.
Who or what people or experiences have you learned from? If it's lessons that you learned from somebody who was doing something that you said, I want to do it differently. You don't have to say who they are, but yeah, but I'm sure that has influenced your interest in the topic, your investigation of it, your work to build out the book and to start initiatives, that there have been people in your careers that you picked things up from, or you just kind of saw it gave you an understanding of the importance of this and what can and can't be possible. Erin, we'll start with you on that.
Well, I think there's two parts of this. I don't think this would have ever happened without Tim and Tina's book, the Educator Wellness book, because that Bill and I went to a training and we were just blown away because we're like, this is just inherently, we thought, what leaders do to help the teachers and the educators that work for them. And we were surprised to find out, I would say, that there's a lot of stories of examples of maybe it not happening as much. And so I give, and I know Bill does too, but
Yeah, we both
Tina
do.
a bunch of the credit for, like, okay, they had the framework created with the dimensions, so we can build off of that because we ourselves have had great leaders. I mean, I have a traveling husband, and I had at the time 3 little kids. And if they were sick or if anything was happening, and you're a teacher in the classroom, and I'm like, how in the world am I going to navigate this? How am I going to leave? Because I am the math teacher, and math teachers cannot leave the classroom. But I had a very supportive school leader. You need to leave right now. We've got this covered. Don't worry about it. And having somebody just put your needs first and foremost was a great feeling. Just like, oh my gosh, I don't have to like worry about my own coverage because I was in another building or I had to. Oh, you can't find a sub? I don't know what to tell you. We don't want that for our teachers and our educators. We want to be like, you need to take care of your family, your needs, do it by all means. So
And I
That's
think,
been to
I
be a
have a
good
lot of
thing.
examples like that, but how many do you want, Ross?
yeah, there's another whole podcast worth. Yeah, and I think for me, Tina and Tim, like we literally said to them that this would be great, but we're education leaders. How's this look at scale? And because that's what because Erin and I were grappling with, what does this look at scale? And they're like, well, that's something, maybe you should explore that and think about writing a book about that. So that's the origin story of this book. But so they've had a profound influence, and the work they do is important. Locally, I think the thing that slowed me down was a chief academic officer in our district when I provided leadership to a department of student well-being and program innovation. But the student well-being part, I got to work closely with a crisis team, and that crisis team was dynamic. We'd have different people come on and off of it, but we had some tried and true leaders. And when you're responding to a student crisis or a staff crisis, and that team has to be deployed, it's sobering. It's usually at the end of some failed attempts of proactive support. But what struck me about that team was not only were they grounded in research and evidence-based practice, but they just really would impress upon me as their leader, like this doesn't change unless we systemically think differently. And we're not going to get the kinds of outcomes through a spa day or a jeans Friday or whatever the flavor of the month episodic thing is. Those are all fun and we're going to keep doing them. But that can't be the foundation of your effort. We have to think about this the way a crisis team thinks. And that seed was planted, and then we had COVID, and then it became a really necessary thing on the other side of it to really explore and think about how we might do that. So that the various members of that crisis team and those that have led that work in our district, but it's a really phenomenal team that shows up just when we need them, when there's a loss of life or something significant. But the thinking they put behind it's what really inspired me to look differently at wellness.
I really like the fact that you both descriptions are all within the context of what makes it challenging. I surface this with every topic we talk about here, because if you're just going down topics that are covered in a book, it's all going to sound good most of the time. It can
Right.
also sound easy. It'll sound like, okay, great. And with wellness and well-being in particular, there's a lot of really good ideas that when you really reflect on it, you would say, well, yeah, but this is never going to happen, right? Like maybe one person can read this and put some of these things into place,
Right.
but really like trying to actually create a culture around it, there's something just missing because it's not accounting for the environmental factors that make that so difficult, that are inhospitable, right, organism for some of the things we want to do, and we are working against that. And if we're not addressing it directly and really thinking about it and really learning the lessons from what has not worked and being very honest about that and saying, look, like this thing we tried, we thought it was going to be great, it was okay, but
Right.
it really wasn't, it wasn't the
Yeah.
thing, or it was just we just had the wrong idea, we didn't ask the right questions, we tried, and hopefully we communicated about that. Hopefully we're continuing to try to build together, right? So there is acknowledgement of the fact that this is a priority and that the efforts are happening, but also we're being honest about the fact that we don't think it's solved yet.
And I think that's right. I mean, it's we have to model that in every part of the job. We should be modeling that kind of thing. I said it doesn't make you a bad leader that you set out to do something and it didn't work, but it might be an indicator of a poor leadership if you're not learning from it, if you're not pivoting, if you're not, just growing through it. We got to be bold. If I want bold but not reckless leaders in my district, I need to give them space to try and fail and then get up and learn from it and move forward. And yet we don't, it's not always how we walk forward. It's how we intend to walk forward. It's how we're going to have to walk forward with this topic. And, and there's no sense in pretending it's easy. It's not easy. If it were easy, we'd be doing it. There's no sense pretending it's not of value, or it's a teacher's problem. Hey, when I was your age, there's no sense in adopting that kind of mentality. We just have to let people know we're not sure which of these things is going to work well, because any decision that's made at the district level will be a great or poor decision based on how you're situated, or on a continuum. So we're not going to bat 1,000 on everything that's tried, and we're certainly not, when it comes to somebody's wellness, going to make. But I think we've had some success in identifying wellness representatives. We call them wellness reps at school level, people that have taken on the work, and we've built community around them. We're starting to build their capacity as we start to introduce this idea with our designated leaders. Everybody knows it's a priority, and yet there are no dollars behind it yet. There's not an office division. There's no structure that supports that it's important yet. And it's hard to go, well, we're going to build up this, and yeah, we got to cut 100 other program positions. Like, it's just not, we're not situated right now. It's just going to be difficult. So we got to be honest about it, and sort of, and we're going to have to be a learning system in this way, truly.
Well, and that was where I was going to just add on to what you said, because Bill, if the school leader, the district leader is not reflective, and if they don't want authentic answers, because you brought that up before, that then they're not going to change. Like, you can hope and pray and wish, and nothing is going to change. So that is something that we really would encourage, is for the school and the district leader to be in classrooms and talking to teachers, because if you don't have any data, if it's working or not, because you're not around, you'll never know. So be visible, be present, be vulnerable. I mean, do exactly what Bill was saying. If things don't work, it doesn't work. This is the same thing as teaching. You have a flop lesson, you reflect on it. What made it flop? Take away maybe one positive, we hope. But then don't think that you have to figure this out alone. Work with your team to develop, to think, to be proactive, and not just say, well, we tried it once and now it's one and done. Because that is what we don't want to happen. That's why we ended with that monitoring, like really take a good look at what's happening, what's going on. And then what are the proactive things that you can do? Celebrate when you see something done well and right. Listen, like authentically listen to the people around you, because they're going to have some truth serum. You're going to hear it. And that's what you want. Embrace that, because you cannot be a learning, growing organization if you are not reflective and open to what you hear.
So, for those listening to this, whenever they happen to be listening, whatever tomorrow is for you out there, what are one or two practical actions these leaders can take tomorrow to just begin the process of embedding wellness into their school systems, of trying something or getting the ball rolling, whether they have given this much thought in the past or not felt successful, right? What's a good starting point? What's something that's practical and actionable?
I have two things. One, take care of your own well-being. I think first and foremost, find out what you need as an educator and then take care of it, whether it be on the physical, the mental, the emotional, the social side, whatever it is, set your own goals and make little action steps so you can be successful. The other step that I would really encourage school leaders is ask what other people want and need. Because I think by having these conversations, you're going to start hearing that people do want this work. People, anytime I present on educator wellness or leading educator wellness, I cannot tell you how many people just come up to me afterwards and say, but how do I get started? What do I need to do? And I said, listen to the people around you because they're telling you. And then don't think you have to do the work alone because it is a lot for one person to do. So a little, just listen, take good notes, get a good group of people around you who are also, I would say, believe in the work as well.
I mean, I'll try not to be too redundant, but I think they're close cousins, what I'm going to share. I think a little time self-reflecting on in what ways what is the evidence of wellness in your building? Like if you're getting feedback and people are feeling disenfranchised, there's low morale, what are those indicators that give you evidence that maybe a focus on wellness is important? Really taking a minute to understand what your perspectives are, what other influence or biases may be influencing the way you're thinking about it. And then that first, and then quickly then expand out and find your tribe. Like find people that will be with you in this work and name it. Say, look, this is unacceptable. Like that we continue to come to work. We volunteer to be here. We all choose, we all have choices, and we're here together. Let's not just succumb to our current realities. How can we have some agency over? Let's name it first, and then they can work. We got a whole book worth of activities and stuff they can engage in. But let's name it and let's find the people that are really see it the way you might see it as a leader, as a need, and then start there. Because if you start out trying to make the plan, writing goals and objectives and laying it on top of your school improvement, you're going to miss the important part, which is developing a clear understanding of where you want to go and making sure that that you're with them, not that they're with you. Make sure you're with them and what their needs are as you move forward.
Excellent. Well, listeners, the book is Leading Educator Wellness. You can find it from Solution Tree or wherever you get your books. You can also, if you have not already, you can please subscribe to The Authority if you enjoyed this interview. If you've been enjoying our episodes recently, you'll get them in your feed there every week. We're available wherever you listen. You can also visit the podcast network to learn about all of our shows. So check all of that out. Erin and Bill, I want to thank you again for being here.
We appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Ross, for the opportunity.
Yes,
Thanks so
it was
much.
Great.